Chris, stay with us. Grab a seat, if that's okay. Can I ask either one or both of you to come back? Lisa to come back, and Liam as well. And we've also got joining our panel. We're a bit of I think we're one chair short. We've also got joining our panel Wendy McChrystal from the Mental Health Company as well. So a really quick overview this afternoon of some of the mental health and also wider occupational health issues that we face as an industry. So has anybody got any questions for our panel? Sorry, it was really quiet and silent. Right, yeah, we can finish early if that's fine. I'm going to start off with going back to Lisa with some of your statistics. So you put up a slide which showed, it was a pie chart showing the percentages of why people are off with ill health. Can you just tell us a little bit more about one or two of the bigger chunks on that slide? Because I think I could probably read the little writing at the side of the really big chunk, but probably people in the audience might struggle because I'm conscious we've got some sun in here as well. So what's the biggest cause of sickness?
The biggest reason actually isn't a reason at all. So we know there's a lot of unknown sickness absence in the industry. I think our last quarter, it was about 28% of all recorded absences are for unknown reasons. But if we ignore that, the main issue at the moment is MSDs. I think it was about 16% for all MSDs, so back problems, other fractures. And then second to that is mental well-being and mental health. So it's nothing too surprising at all.
Yeah, so does everybody know what MSD stands for? So musculoskeletal diseases, disorders. Yeah. So basically, it's your a lot of back pain, often backs, particularly when you get to my age. Thank you. Have we got any other? Anybody else want to make any observations on that, or should I just open it up to any other questions? Any questions?
Going to the drug testing idea, how do you introduce that in a company whilst preserving people's sort of mental health safety and not creating a culture of suspicion and distrust?
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. Like I said, we did one of the blockades and, there was... Naturally, we thought, how are people going to actually take this, especially the workers out there on the grounds? And it was the most positive feedback, as we talked about. I think because they understood it was there for their own safety and protection to support them, they really took it on board. And we had even comments such as, I've not been drug tested and I've been, working on the rail for 8 years. Because obviously... it's random, but we just did everybody. So as they signed in at the SACS cabin, they then moved on to us and just did the drug testing. I think they felt safer and acknowledging that their colleagues were supporting them. Because when you're out on site, if somebody makes one wrong decision, and obviously they're under the influence of drugs, even if it's been, 5 hours ago they were taking cannabis or cocaine, whatever it might be, the drug of choice, as we notice more and more people do it more than alcohol at the moment, which is absolutely shocking for me, to be honest with you. I think they'll feel actually they've, their minds, they're thinking straight. The decisions that they make are going to be the right decisions rather than them having, drugs within their system and potentially making a decision which could, either injure them or end their life.
Can I just say, and I think it's really important to point out it's a massive preventative tool. So it's about proactively setting expectation. So, I can remember the day I landed in the rail industry. I'd worked in manufacturing for 7 years. And it was like, oh, this is different. Okay. And it was just setting the expectation of people coming into the industry that this is what we expected. And I think that's a big part of it.
And what we did notice, so we did it one night. Actually, Leanne, my colleague, was out that night as well. The next night, people just automatically, signed in, then went to do the drug testing. It was just as if they got used to it. It was just the routine, and they knew we were there to protect them. We weren't there to catch them out. Nobody was doing anything of the sort. It was all about each and every one of us getting home safe every single day. And that's our motto, and it's the railway's motto as well.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the really interesting things is that people realising that actually it's about all the people around them that are being tested and safe as well. I think, and that plays into probably what Liam was talking about in terms of people, working together and being prepared to share their thoughts, how they feel, but also any issues that they see, because it just feels like it's that community. You've got a microphone now. I think Monica is now expecting you to say something.
But there was no question.
No, so you don't have to say anything if you want to, but I just thought it played really well into that, space.
I would say that I absolutely agree with Wendy. It is about that reduction, that prevention of issues. My son doesn't work in the rail industry, but he works as a vulcanizer doing, working in quarries. So there is random drug testing. Now, one of the things that he says, he's worked with a number of different companies. He's now set up his own company. But he's worked with a number of different companies. And one of the things he said is loads of them who are under the age of 30 are using drugs at weekends and even while they're at work. And that's a shocking thing for me, that happens. And it's that being random and being that they're going onto site to do a job, they're not employed directly by different companies, they're coming in as contractors, it's being missed. So I think something as simple as this, that, I've taken one of your leaflets to hand to him. I think something as simple as this that would speed up the process will reduce the risk of harm to other people, because it does put into people's minds, I will get caught, I will lose my job, it's important, but ultimately it's about protecting everybody else that they're working with and working for.
Okay, any other questions for the panel? We've got one at the back and then the lady down here. Or the lady down here and then one at the back, whichever.
Hi, my message is for Chris, or I suppose it can go to any of you really. Do you, and apologies if you mentioned this earlier, do you have any materials that can be downloaded for organisations to help support them in educating their staff and the wider community, I suppose?
Well, a lot of it kind of comes from kind of your public ICBs. They kind of lead a lot of what's happening locally where you are. But what we do within the British Transport Police is we routinely have kind of meetings, and we try to encourage the kind of interoperability. But a part of the issue is that a lot, even within BTP, along the rail industry, everyone's still working in silos. You can have two agencies working side by side, and it's two totally different suicide performance plans. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive that national kind of identity of what we're doing. So we're reviewing the suicide prevention plans with the DFT, and we're working with Network Rail to see, well, how can we get that national idea, and we can all kind of operate within that. But we're not, and it's just about constantly having that conversation and saying, well, what information there is available, but it's about having something. We're sending people out there to work, and they've not been given the appropriate training to deal with anybody. They're not given the appropriate, well, what is my remit? Am I overreaching when I'm dealing with someone here? What is my role in prevention? For example, an officer's role is we keep someone safe, we take them to the person who can then actually give them the care. Because by design, you've got doctors, clinicians who are there to actually provide that clinical care. We can't do it. If we can't do it, we can't expect rail industry staff to do it either. So how is that fair to anyone to get them well informed? So it's a continual conversation. The training's always kind of going on around it. And I kind of asked that question kind of during my presentation about who thought suicide was wrong, who thought it was right. The reason for that, and it links kind of into the drug testing here, is that when you're effectively training people, you're trying to get people to change their attitudes towards certain things, because these are the things that are blockers in for doing meaningful, real change. It's people lived experience, and I'll keep going back to people's window of the world. I always say to people that, when I'm doing presentations, when they look at me, they're thinking there's a 40-year-old white privileged man up there doing something, but behind the person, they don't know a father. They've got a dad who's, during my formative years as a teenager, was sectioned in a mental health hospital for 4 years. They don't know my house was burnt down when I was 16. I present myself well, but I've got a lot of trauma in the background. I'm just as susceptible to anybody we see at 2 o'clock, 2 a.m. on the railway in crisis. I'm just as susceptible to that, but people just don't seem to want to be having that conversation. And it's through that effective training that we can possibly do that. And I go back to say that managing suicidal contacts training for Samaritans is a really good gateway one to start that conversation, and I'll really encourage people for that.
Thank you, Chris. One of the things that we've done as part of our Social Week is we've got some podcasts. So on Monday, we launched a podcast between Andrew Haynes and Will Rogers, who's our chair, who's also the MD of East Midlands Railway. And they're talking about health and safety on the railway generally. It's a really interesting 20 minutes if you want to listen to that. Particularly interesting from Andrew's background and some of the experiences that he brought in from aviation as well. But yesterday, we released a second podcast, which was very much focusing around mental health. And it's an interview-ish between one of our engagement managers, Laura, with a chap called Richard Clinic, who some of you may know. Richard is the editor of Modern Railways. And Richard is talking about his personal journey with his mental health. He's very, very open about his challenges. And we need people like that to be prepared to be open and talk and explain to us how it feels from their perspective. Because we all make assumptions. Well, why do you feel like that? And it's really difficult to put yourself into somebody else's shoes. So if you've got, again, it's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes long. If you've got 25 minutes to spare, do go and have a listen to that. It's incredibly powerful as a listen, because it's a very personal story from Richard. And I think there are some links to some online resources as well, which, I mean, there's lots and lots of stuff out there, there's just a few there. But I would absolutely recommend, if you're interested in the subject, to find out more and to hear it from someone who's been through some really tough times and how they tackled it and what they found was the most useful in terms of the help and support that they could access. I would absolutely recommend that to you. The third podcast will be out later in July, because we haven't yet been able to record it, but that will be around violence towards women and girls, because that's another big issue on the railway, sadly. So do have a listen to those podcasts. But anyway, sorry, this lady had a question.
Hi, this is a question for Chris. I was just curious to know, BTP officers obviously are frontline and they face quite a lot of staff, antisocial behaviour as well as suicide. What is in place for them in the workplace to look after themselves?
So this is a key thing also about making sure that your staff are well equipped, because it's all great worrying about people out in the community, but if we're not well equipped to be there for our colleagues, how can we help other people? If we can't look after ourselves and have self-care and have that support mechanism in place, how can we possibly provide that for our communities? So within the British Transport Police, we have an internal safeguarding process in place. What that means is that if there's any managers have got a concern for someone because of an incident or something, a major life factor that's going on, then what we do is we do an internal kind of quick time management meeting to say, well, what support can we put in place for them? So that can be a referral. So every time there's been a death in the railway, we refer people into TRIM. So TRIM managers will have that contact, but again, it's an opt-in, it's not an opt-out. I'd prefer if it was an opt-out kind of option. But then we've also got occupational health and different kind of support mechanisms in that place to kind of support it. And then the Railway Mission. I must say the Railway Mission are the only organisation which have actually closed the loop with me. I'm sharing information with lots of partners, and Liam's the only one who sends me an email saying this is what I've done with the information. Now, it's credit to you that you've done that, because no one else is doing it, and that's really important for us. But I guess the key thing is that we do need to be looking out for each other, and if we're not doing that self-care, we can't work with our communities, and yous are just as important. That's the key thing, is what he's saying. There's a plethora of different organisations that can help you out, do internal, external, but the barrier sometimes is you've got organisational kind of history, organisational knowledge of good practice, bad practice, and somebody's trying to make a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, and it can't really kind of be that. But the key thing is just having that conversation. And I'm happy when I share with people about, I've never had a triggering event yet which has caused me to have suicidal thoughts, which would then lead on to behaviours and maybe action. But I know what my trigger event will be, and I know what my method would be, but that doesn't mean I'm in crisis. For me, I'm happy to share that anything which happened to any of my two young boys where I was a part to play and was an influence would be a really triggering event, and I don't know what space I would be in mentally to deal with that. But then I know how I would, if I was to do something with myself and a method which would be not as traumatic for other people who may be impacted by it, but that doesn't, I've got those attitudes and those beliefs, and I've got that self-awareness, I'm aware of it, but if I knew that happened, I've got that ability to then maybe say, like, I need help, but sometimes I'll need a colleague who's well-informed and well-equipped to say, Chris, you're not quite, are you okay, what's going on? To be able to kind of pull me away from that and support me, because a key thing I want to mention is that nobody wants to die. What it is people just don't know how to deal with what they're living with right now. And it's our ability to say, well, pulling on that string of what's positive in your life, what's going on, can we put in that protective factor to support you? And that's what we do with occupational health and things inside policing. We try and group together as a family to do that, and as a wider railway family, we try to put that in place. And one thing we do externally is whenever someone's bereaved by suicide in England and Wales, we do, it's called implied consent. So we've got around GDPR where someone's died in the railway, we will automatically refer bereaved persons into bereavement support around England and Wales. And then instead of opting out with the police, because I don't know when somebody needs support, and how are they in the right place of mind to say, I need bereavement support right now? The professionals are best placed to do that because they're the right care, right service to do that. So we have to understand our remit and what we can do, and that's signposting people to the right agencies. I don't know if anyone else has got anything about their internal policies they're happy to share about.
Can I just to add to what Chris has said, as a railway mission, we follow up every fatality on the railway, and that includes the rail staff, network rail staff, stations, etc. It also includes British Transport Police. And many years ago, within BTP, the welfare officer used to send out a letter to people to say, you've been involved in an incident, here is the support that's available. When they changed the system, she was no longer able to access the names, and the letters stopped going out. Up to that point, nobody ever got in touch with her to say, oh yes, I need help. But the moment the letters stopped going out, people were contacting her saying, I haven't had my letter. Where's my letter? What's often important for the mental health and well-being of people is not necessarily full-blown counselling support, but the knowledge that somebody cares enough to be in touch. And that is very, very important. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about psychological safety, the open door policy, making sure you have those touch points with staff to be able to say, I know you're going through something, we're here. Might not have the answers, but we can signpost you. Chaplaincy doesn't have all the answers. We'll signpost. The police don't have all the answers, but they can signpost. What's important is communication and dialogue.
Thank you. Any last questions before we wrap up? No, some quite important thoughts, I think, for people to take away. So could I just ask you to thank our panellists and speakers again in the usual way, and then we'll wrap up. So thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. So apologies, I'm standing in front of Wendy here. Just a couple of last quick messages from me. As part of Rail Safety Week, this is really changing the tone totally now. As part of Rail Safety Week, we run some children's competitions. That's about trying to get young people to think about safety on the railway, and there's a whole range of different initiatives that do that in a very formal way. The Rail Safety Week Children's Competitions is quite an informal way, so it's colouring competition for 2 different age groups, and then a design your station competition for slightly older age groups. All the resources for those competitions are on the Rail Safety Week website. So please, if you've got children, if you've got grandchildren, if you've got nephews, nieces, if you've got any connections to your local schools, please go and have a look on the Rail Safety Week website. Signpost those relevant people to the resources that are on there. They can download the colouring competition, and there's some super prizes for the children. But it's really about getting them to start thinking about safety on the railway. So do try and signpost people to those. And the final sort of word from me is thank you to our partners today. Rail Live, obviously, who are our key partner this year from a rail safety perspective, but also to RSSB and DFT, who are sponsoring the podcast that I mentioned and the children's competition. Without that sort of support, we can't do all the various things that we do. And finally, say thank you to you for being here, and enjoy the rest of our live. If you're back tomorrow, enjoy tomorrow. It's going to be even hotter tomorrow, so make sure you bring plenty of sun cream and water. But thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.